Welcome to Native Talk Arizona, presented by Native Health and KRDP 90.7 FM. Later in the show, we'll learn about the University of New Mexico Indigenous Design and Planning Institute with Dr. Theodore Jojola, and we'll chat with Kinsale Drake, Diné poet, writer, editor, and director of the NDN Girls Book Club. But right now, host Lanasha Pawadi talks with Dr. Jennifer Veaco, Interim Medical Director and Family Practice Physician at Native Health.
I'm host Lanasha Pawadi. In the studio with me is Dr. Jennifer Veaco, Interim Medical Director and Family Medicine Physician at Native Health, and is a international board-certified lactation consult who is here to talk about breastfeeding. Hello, Dr. Veaco, and it's an honor to have you on our show today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I didn't initially think I was going to be getting interested in breastfeeding medicine until I had my experience in residency. So I did my family medicine residency in Tucson, Arizona, and I had my first child during residency as well. Mm-hmm. And with residency, you're working in the hospital a lot, especially when I had my child in 2020. We were asked to work in the hospital a lot due to COVID. So because of that, I found myself breast pumping a lot to try to maintain supply and feed my child. And I realized in medical school and a little bit in residency as well, I just wasn't educated about breastfeeding medicine. So luckily I had a good mentor in residency that I learned more about breastfeeding medicine, and it became more of a special interest of mine. And then I later pursued being a lactation consultant because of that.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. And then starting off with the basic, can you tell us why is breastfeeding important?
Well, breastfeeding certainly should be normalized as a good way to feed your baby. Mm-hmm. And as a lactating person, it's beneficial for you as well.
Mm-hmm. And then if someone is currently pregnant, when should they start thinking about breastfeeding?
Well, I would say you should start thinking about breastfeeding during pregnancy as well. I know a lot of times moms are excited to think about, okay, what am I going to dress my child on the way home from the hospital? There's classes all about how to give birth. And the reality is labor, delivery, that can take a couple hours to a couple days, but breastfeeding can take months to years. So trying to get educated about breastfeeding while you're pregnant is going to be really beneficial to your journey.
And how long can you breastfeed?
Well, you can breastfeed for as long as you want to. There's really no max that is too much from a health benefit, from a mental health benefit for the child as well. It is recommended to breastfeed for at least 2 years based off of the WHO and the American Academy of Pediatrics.
And then can you tell us more about the benefits of breastfeeding?
Well, there's many benefits. A lot of times people will reference benefits to babies, and so certainly breastfed babies are at lower risk for asthma, obesity, diabetes, SIDS. They also have less risk for having GI bugs, ear infections, that kind of thing. Also, the longer a woman breastfeeds, that reduces her risk for breast cancer.
Oh, wow. And comparing like breastfeeding to, let's say, formula, does breastfeeding save a lot of money?
I think it's dependent on the person, right? So with breastfeeding, there's a lot of things that you can buy to help with breastfeeding. You can buy, so generally speaking, a double electric pump should be covered by insurance. Mm-hmm. But if you want to have like a portable pump or that kind of thing, that might not be covered by insurance, and you would have to pay money for that.
And how easy is it to breastfeed?
So I think that it's a misconception that breastfeeding is easy. It can be easy to some people, experienced mothers, but every baby is different. And so you might be able to breastfeed one baby just fine, and then your next baby is very different in temperament, or they might have a tongue tie or that kind of thing. So it takes some work. It's a team effort for baby and mom to kind of get the groove of things. So it takes a lot of time initially in the beginning. Mom might feel like she's breastfeeding all the time, every hour, every couple hours. That's normal for the baby to kind of practice, for you to practice as a mom, and for your milk to come in.
And what tips do you have to make breastfeeding easier?
Well, I think that it's important to reach out for help if you're wanting to pursue breastfeeding and you're having some difficulties, whether it be pain, decreased milk supply, or trouble with latching. It's important to try to breastfeed and practice in the hospital. If you do deliver in the hospital, oftentimes hospitals will have lactation consultants that you can reach out and work with while you're in the hospital. So definitely in the first couple of days of life for the baby and for yourself, that could be beneficial. If you have difficulty later on, it will be good to go to a clinic. You can come to me as a lactation consultant and get some answers for whatever is troubling.
And what if someone is having trouble breastfeeding?
Well, I would reach out and get some help from a lactation consultant sooner rather than later. Breast milk is a supply and demand thing. So how I describe it is like the more breast milk is expressed and the more baby eats, or the more that you're able to express with the pump, the more milk you're going to produce. And so if you're having difficulty and mom stops breastfeeding, then that can affect milk supply. So the sooner the better.
Mm-hmm. What if somebody is having problems with latching? Do you have any tips on how a mother can help their baby latch?
There are some videos and pictures to reference on CDC website, but once again, trying to work with a lactation consultant in the hospital in the first couple days is ideal, so that you can kind of learn proper latching. Baby can start learning and practicing.
Would you have any advice for anybody who is maybe on their way to or getting close to their delivery date? Is there anything that they can do to prepare themselves if breastfeeding is what they want to do?
Yeah, I would recommend them check out some resources online through the CDC, and then also talk with their provider about their breastfeeding goals, so that their provider can point them in certain, whether they be community resources or answer specific questions.
And how important is it to maintain a healthy diet while breastfeeding, or maybe before breastfeeding and also during breastfeeding?
So it is recommended to take a prenatal vitamin while you're pregnant and while you're breastfeeding. So I would recommend continuing your multivitamin. As for diet goes, it is important to continue to have adequate hydration and calories. And so I don't recommend moms to go on like drastic diets to try to lose the baby weight. That can affect milk supply if they're not getting in enough calories. There's really aside from a multivitamin, I wouldn't recommend any specific supplement without consulting with your provider to see if it's beneficial. Because a normal diet, assuming that there's adequate hydration, adequate calories, mom should be able to produce appropriate milk. You don't have to worry about, I have to have a specific diet or else my breast milk is not going to be healthy. That's not a thing.
I know some moms have a concern sometimes while they're breastfeeding. They always ask the question, is my baby getting enough compared to formula? You can see from a bottle how much the baby is drinking. How do you know if your baby is getting enough when they're being breastfed?
Yeah, I mean, that can be difficult because as you mentioned, when you're bottle feeding, you're able to record ounces of what the baby is taking and breastfeeding. I mean, there's no ounces on the breast, right? But the best way to know that the baby's being fed well is the baby well hydrated? Is the baby producing normal poops and normal pees? Is the baby gaining weight appropriately? These are all things that we look at as providers to make sure that the baby is thriving. So either at discharge at the hospital and when you're following up with your provider in the clinic, if the baby is gaining weight appropriately, if the baby is having normal poops, normal pees, staying well hydrated, you are making enough, and not to doubt yourself and your body.
Do you need to supplement with formula if you don't think breastfeeding is enough?
So, supplementation, I would say, is kind of like a case-by-case basis. There's certainly medical reasons why some people supplement. If your goal is to do exclusive breastfeeding, then I wouldn't recommend supplementing unless you already have a discussion with your provider and see that it is actually medically necessary. I mean, formula is beneficial if baby isn't gaining enough weight, if baby's not staying well hydrated, if you're not producing enough milk. But these are things that we should kind of rule out and make sure and see if that's actually the case.
And you mentioned situations where somebody is not producing enough milk. Are there any tips you suggest that mothers can do for themselves to increase their milk supply if they do see a drop in their supply?
So there can be a drop in supply for a number of reasons. So I would recommend talking to your provider about that if you're wanting to maintain a milk supply and trying to figure out why, because there can be medical reasons that we can do lab work to rule out. It also could be related to supply and demand. So if someone starts supplementing with formula and is not breastfeeding as much, then the supply drop is expected. If the supply drop is unexpected, then at that point I would make an appointment ASAP so we can figure that out together. And then just making sure that you're having enough hydration, drinking at least 2 liters of water a day, and enough calories.
I know August is National Breastfeeding Month. Do you know why there is an awareness for Breastfeeding Month?
In some cultures, breastfeeding is still taboo, so it is important to promote breastfeeding and to normalize it. So I do support continuing to have National Breastfeeding Awareness Month so that we can say, hey, this is a normal bodily function. It's a good way to provide nutrition to your kids. It's a good way for you to stay healthy as a mom, to reduce your risk for breast cancer, and to try to promote safe places for moms to continue to breastfeed.
And finally, where can our listeners find more information about breastfeeding, and how can they contact you, or who should they contact for further questions?
The CDC has some good information about breastfeeding. Also, WIC has some good information about breastfeeding, and we do partner with WIC here at Native Health, so I would check them out as well. If a patient is wanting to see a lactation consultant, then they can follow up with me in the clinic. I'm at all 3 clinics, Central, Mesa, and West. And I know WIC has some lactation counselors that they can chat with as well. And I would also recommend if the mom is wanting to do exclusive breastfeeding, talking with a lactation consultant in the hospital if there was a hospital birth, to kind of find out more specific community resources in their area.
Perfect. I would like to thank you, Dr. Veaco, for taking time out to talk to us today, to tell us more information about breastfeeding, the benefits of breastfeeding.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Coming up, Lanasha talks with Dr. Theodore Jojola. Support for KRDP 90.7 FM comes in part from Native Health, with 2 locations in Phoenix, 4041 North Central Avenue, Building C, near the corner of Central Avenue and Indian School Road, and at 2423 West Dunlap Avenue. Native Health is also located in Mesa at 777 West Southern Avenue, near the corner of Southern Avenue and Extension Road. Native Health provides primary medical, dental, behavioral health, WIC, and wellness services for the urban Native American community. For more information, call 602-279-5262 or visit our webpage at nativehealthphoenix.org.
Welcome back to Native Talk Arizona, presented by Native Health and KRDP 90.7 FM. I'm host Lanasha Puadi. The University of New Mexico Indigenous Design and Planning Institute is a new initiative for the School of Architecture and Planning at the University of New Mexico. On the phone with me is Dr. Theodore Jojola, Director, Distinguished, and Regents Professor. Hello, Dr. Jojola. It's an honor to have you on our show today.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I'm able to contribute.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, I'm an enrolled member of the Pueblo of Isleta, which some of you may know is just south of Albuquerque. I am a professor in community and regional planning. My area of specialization is Indigenous planning, but a lot of our activity of our institute is really around both Indigenous planning and Indigenous design.
Can you tell us more about the University of New Mexico's Indigenous Design and Planning Institute?
Well, I guess we're young, relatively speaking. We got established in 2012, and essentially this was an initiative in order to be able to articulate our approach as Indigenous planners and designers in the profession, that being the American Planning Association, American Institute of Architects. Now we're also making inroads into landscape architecture as well, too. But the whole basic idea is how do we develop our own community-based approaches that really look at culture and identity as a way to inform community development.
And I know you mentioned it was fairly new and established in 2012. How has the Institute evolved since it began?
Well, we began with a series of small projects and eventually began to make inroads into also impacting, especially the community and regional planning program in terms of its coursework. So we work in three major areas. We work with professional development, we work with faculty and students, and we also work with tribes themselves in offering technical assistance. So at each particular area, we essentially try and impact and influence how it is that people think about planning, and really its both role and responsibility towards furthering the vision and the initiatives that tribes themselves are trying to pursue.
And what are the pillars of the Institute?
Well, we basically approach community development in a way that helps to build local capacity. We actually have a number of tenets that we subscribe to that are really related to how it is that we change the minds of professionals and students and faculty in terms of working in strategic ways within the community. Probably the one that is the most central and key to this is the idea that the people are beautiful already, because the way that we approach our community conversations is not by taking a bunch of information and basically having a conversation around what is lacking in the community, what essentially is the kind of thing that a lot of people tend to hear from outsiders about how they're not well positioned, or they have low economic esteem, or essentially have a lot of challenges and problems. Instead, we change that conversation around in order to be able to say, what is it that you consider to be your strongest assets in the community? What is it that you love about your community? What do you know about your culture and your language? And how does this essentially help to inform the way that you go about dealing with the kind of challenges? So it's much more of a kind of a positive approach and looking at how it is then that you can take these positive assets and use it as a way in order to meet the challenges that you're currently facing.
And can you expand on the overarching goal of the Institute and how the Institute's work fosters sustainable communities among Indigenous populations guided by principles of social justice and distinguished by healthy environments, strong local economics, and thriving cultures?
Yeah, actually, those words are pretty much picked up from some of the key discussions that are going on nationally. There's an area of application that's called placemaking, and for a long time it was initiated by an organization called Art Place America. We were funded for several projects through them, especially on those kind of key objectives of trying to think about how it is that we could bring that kind of mandate into local community empowerment. We work with what are called place-based communities, largely indigenous or what you might call tribal, but essentially what we believe is that any community that lives successively for generations in the same place begins to evolve a worldview, and that worldview basically defines their relationship to the land and amongst themselves as people. So within that auspices, then we really look at how it is that that worldview then can attend to making the communities more sustainable and resilient, especially as outlined by the ancestors, and beginning to sort of also key in on conversations about how settler colonialism disrupted much of the traditional indigenous knowledge that existed, and trying to bring those lifeways back in a way that is much more attuned to maintaining culture, language, identity in a very responsible way.
Dr. Jojola, are more Indigenous individuals entering the field of architecture and going back to their tribal lands?
Absolutely. I think it's changed so much since I began as faculty at the University of New Mexico. I actually am one of the longest lived faculty members at UNM. I started in 1980, so that's 40 plus years. And the first part of that was actually being director of Native American Studies until 1996, and that's when I went full time into planning as faculty. But what we really honed in on is not only being able to establish ourselves in terms of our own capacity to assist tribes and also inform professional organizations and associations, as well as teach faculty and students about our process, but it's really based on developing an academic model because we are academically based. So we do have courses that we've developed. We have a particular style of what we call the 7 generations planning approach, which we use within community development. And we publish and we share a lot of these in the literature for people to look at and understand. And of course, then we take these practices and put them into the community in terms of staging how it is that they can learn from a different approach to what is generally considered to be sort of Euro-Western approaches in terms of community.
And is there any buildings or location that the Institute was a part of that we could see?
Probably one that is accessible, especially to folks there at in Arizona, is the Native American Cultural Center at Northern Arizona University. We were the cultural consultant for that, and we actually use an indigenous design process in order to have the community conversations and develop the architectural program, which in a sense kind of brought that community out of a logjam. They had been discussing the development of a center for 20 plus odd number of years, but had been frustrated by a whole number of different things. And largely it was because they couldn't build consensus about, what was the purpose of the center and what was it going to accomplish and what kind of programming would occur there. So through this particular process, we were successful in being able to build that program and have these conversations and start detailing the specifications around that. The lead organization was Studio Ma, which is an architectural company that's based out of Phoenix. And we were able to get the whole process through in 2.5 years from concept to actual construction. So that was a major accomplishment.
do you have any favorite success stories?
Oh, we have tons of success stories. But I think the one that's kind of impacted us the most was one of the first major studio projects we took on with Isleta del Sur, which is the 20th Pueblo in El Paso, Texas. I say 20th because we have the 19 Pueblos here in New Mexico, and the 20th one is there in Texas. We had assisted them with helping to develop a cultural corridor plan. And the challenge there was they felt that as a community and as a tribal trust land area, they weren't really respected, and they were getting a lot of trespass and also people not really being cognitive of the fact that they were on reservation land. So they asked us to assist them in developing a way to kind of rebrand themselves, land use plans and building styles and blueprint for the future in terms of how they might be able to position themselves better. So we were able to accomplish that, and they're still using that plan to this day.
So your programs are national rather than just like in Arizona?
Yes, we've assisted communities all the way from Ecuador. We have a working relationship with a university in Puebla in Mexico. We just finished working in a community, Glovan, in Alaska. Then we've got other projects that we've got scattered also in Arizona. We've worked with Diné College, and in particular Round Rock chapter. We just finished updating the master plan for the Santa Fe Indian School. Yeah, we work in lots of areas with lots of different kinds of scales of development and planning.
Oh, wow, that is amazing. And Dr. Jojola, where can our listeners go to learn more about the Indigenous Design and Planning Institute, and how can they contact you for further questions?
They can go to our website, which is just idpi@unm.edu, but they can also contact us through our email, which is also the same, idpi@unm.edu. They can contact me directly. It's just tjojola@unm.edu. So yeah, we've got a full complement of staff that can ask. You can ask questions of not just our projects, but also potentially raise possibility of working with you in your particular kinds of projects, or even from the standpoint of asking about our degree programs and how it is that you might be able to get involved in getting a degree at UNM in Indigenous planning.
Would like to thank you, Dr. Jojola, for taking time out to talk to us today to tell us more about your amazing institute and all of the programs that you provide.
Okay, great. Well, appreciate the chance in order to let you all know about the amazing things that we've been able to accomplish this past decade.
Up next, host Lanasha Puwadi chats with Kinsale Drake. Support for KRDP 90.7 FM comes in part from Native Health, with 2 locations in Phoenix, 4041 North Central Avenue, Building C, near the corner of Central Avenue and Indian School Road, and at 2423 West Dunlap Avenue. Native Health is also located in Mesa at 777 West Southern Avenue, near the corner of Southern Avenue and Extension Road. Native Health's patient enrollment specialists can help you enroll, renew, or update your access information. This can be done in person, on the phone, or via Zoom, days, nights, or weekends. It's fast, easy, and can make a difference in keeping your health care coverage. For more information, call 602-285-9492.
Welcome back to Native Talk Arizona, presented by Native Health and KRDP 90.7 FM. I'm host Lanasha Pawadi. Kinsale Drake is a Diné poet, writer, editor, model, and playwright whose work has appeared in various publications and director of NDN Girls Book Club, a collaboration of Native female artists to inspire young people to keep writing and find community in art. Hello, Kinsale. It's an honor to have you on our show today.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, it's a pleasure to have you today. And before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your journey?
Yeah, so yat Kinsale Drake nishe nat odan tratina nishle bilagana bashichin ashihadashiche bilagana dashanale akut ego atsana nishle. My name is Kinsale Drake. I'm currently in the Bay Area in California. I just graduated from college, and my family is Diné from Navajo Mountain, Utah. And I'm a poet, but I do a lot of things, and I run Indian Girls Book Club. As the director, I'm writing my own manuscript, and I'm currently a fellow with a few artist programs.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. And you do a lot. We've definitely checked out your work and know that you're a writer, winner of the J. Edgar Meeker Prize, the Academy of American Poets Prize, and the Young Native Playwrights Award, and so much more. You are also a model and run the NDN Girls Book Club. So I don't even know where to begin. And you just mentioned you graduated from college, but not just a college. You graduated from Yale.
I'm glad that's done, but it is a lot. I've always been a really busy kid.
Oh, I don't know how you juggle everything. Can you tell us, how did you get started in writing and in poetry?
I've always loved reading. My parents, specifically my dad, was always a really big reader, and he would always read to us out loud when we were kids, whenever he had time off of work. And so I grew up really loving fantasy. I read, Percy Jackson, The Hunger Games, like all these YA novels. I loved picture books. And like my parents said that when I was a little kid, I would memorize books that I was hearing from my dad before I even knew how to read, and I would try to read them back to them. So it just was really fun to me, and I grew up collecting a lot of books, but poetry specifically I didn't get into until high school, and it was because a teacher of mine had taken initiative to read some of the poems I was writing for an exercise in class, and she was like, these are pretty good, you should submit these and try to do a summer program or something. And that was really the first time I'd been taken aside and told that I had potential with my writing. And then I became a national student poet, which is through Scholastic. It's like a national program where poets represent different regions of the country. And so I was the first Native national student poet, and that changed a lot of stuff. So I got to do a lot more readings, and I got to connect with more communities nationally and get more confident in performing. And that's kind of how I got my start in now what I do professionally.
And you were also recognized as the 2022 In the Know Changemaker in one of the Times People Changing How We See the World. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so the Time Magazine one, that was an amazing experience. So Ava DuVernay, who's a filmmaker, she did Selma and also did A Wrinkle in Time. We'd met the year before at a workshop, and she reached out because she was curating that issue of Time Magazine, and she wanted me to represent my decade of life. So I was representing teenagers in the U.S. And so that was a huge honor, and it was really exciting. I got to go to New York. I got to wear my regalia, and I got to wear my, my concho belt, like in the piece, and I got to talk about art, and that was amazing. And the Changemaker one was a great recognition too, because I got to talk about Indian Girls Book Club. I got to talk about the work that I've been doing workshops, things like that. So both of those were really huge honors, and I'm really humbled to have been recognized in that way.
Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. And talking about the NDN Girls Book Club, can you tell us more about it and how did it start?
Yeah, so I've been doing literary programming and workshops for 7 years since I was a national student poet. And I love teaching. I want to be a teacher when I'm older. I want to work, in a tribal college and continue to teach and be an educator. But that was my main job, like through college and through everything. And I just loved, being with students who were writing their first poems and that moment when they would, realize there was so much literature from Native authors, and specifically like working with Navajo students, like there's so many Navajo authors and Navajo poets. There's a whole genre of Diné poetics, and bringing those into a space and seeing how the work would just kind of flower from that was really inspiring. And so Indian Girls Book Club was something that came out of my thesis in college. I was trying to figure out how to keep Native students in higher education. And specifically, I was doing research about creative writing programs, how there's like very few supportive programs in higher education. What would one that was very supportive for Native students specifically look like to keep up retention rates? And so that combined with my experience and my love for books, that just birthed Indian Girls Book Club. And we started doing workshops, and I had this idea. I got this grant basically from First Peoples Fund, and I was like, let's just send out books for free. Like, people want books and people want to read, and what's stopping us from doing that? And so it was 3 different things. Now it functions as 3 different things. We do author talks, so we connect people to authors. We send out books for free, and we provide them to tribal libraries and programs and things like that. And then the third part is the workshops we do with Native youth.
Oh, wow. That is so amazing how all of that evolved from really just a thesis, as you mentioned. How do you think the book club encourages the youth to write, read, and think about these topics?
Yeah, so 2 things. I think the first is that, obviously we've increased access to books and resources. All of our workshops are always free for youth. We never make youth pay to enter the spaces where we have those workshops. Our author talks are on Zoom, and they're also free. They never have to pay for that. So you have an increased accessibility in terms of actually getting to meet these authors and talk to them and read their books. And then we also have, the workshops, and they're very encouraging. We go to schools. We were just in Arizona a little while ago doing some workshops at a couple schools there. But we also want to make it fun for people, especially for like Native kids. And so we have a lot of friendly designs and colors that draw people in. We love the color pink. Like, we love embracing things like Hello Kitty, like all of these really fun things that get people to come over to us and be like, hey, what's this? So I love drawing. I always loved drawing. I love designing. And so that's also really fun for me to come up with like cool designs for merchandise or bookmarks, things like that, collaborations with other artists. So, it makes things more fun, and it encourages youth to get involved and to ask more questions.
Kinsale, can you tell us what events or activities you have planned for the book club?
Yeah, so our next things we're going to be doing are going to be in New Mexico. So we have some pop-ups around Santa Fe and Albuquerque in mid-August. We're going to do book trades. We're going to have people, we're just going to give out books for free, depending on, people can come up to our booth and ask, I love this genre. Do you have a recommendation? We, in the fall, are going to be in a couple states, which will be cool. We'll be up at Muckleshoot doing some workshops with youth there. We'll be in Milwaukee. We'll be back in Arizona. And we will always be sending out care packages. So I'm excited. It'll be really fun. And then I'm actually really excited because next year we got invited to Toronto. It's going to be my first time going to First Nations communities with Indian Girls Book Club, but I'm really excited. And we have a booth or a table with the fashion marketplace that's happening in 2024.
And talking about books, do you have a favorite book, novel, poem, or like a genre?
I love fiction. My favorite book is always going to be The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich. I love it. It has a great love story in it. I love romance, and it's, I love a good romance. And Firekeeper's Daughter is a YA book, and I love that as well. I'm always a sucker for a good slow burn or like a good romance.
And what is the last book you read?
Oh gosh, the book that I'm currently reading is Billy Ray Belcourt's essay collection from when they were in England, and I'm really enjoying it. I cycle between This Wound is a World and a history of my brief body, and I love them. I think that they're so gorgeous. So that's like the last thing I read.
Is there any kind of memorable event or award that you've received?
Well, I think the most memorable event has to be our book launch, our club launch in Phoenix that we had, just because this always reminds me of home, and it's always nice to be back there because of the community. We had it at Palabras with Abalone Mountain Press, which is a Navajo woman-run press, and so many people came out. There were like babies there, there were older women there were like people and their partners showing up. We had like Navajo boba to authors performing, and it was just such a beautiful evening with everybody and seeing the community that had come together for the book club.
Oh, wow, that is so awesome. And speaking about Phoenix and coming back to your hometown, do you have any events that will bring you back to Arizona?
Yeah, I'm coming back for the ASU open mic in the fall. So Labriola, which is like the native library up at ASU, they have an amazing poetry series that goes on, and they have these awesome open mics. And so I'm going to help host that sometime in October, I believe. So I'll be back pretty soon.
Oh my gosh, that is so awesome. Hopefully we get to see you and also see more of your work when you stop by. Kinsale, why do you think it is important to encourage the youth to read and write?
I think, there's so much talent that our youth have, and sometimes, like the story I told at the beginning, it just takes a little encouragement for somebody to really unlock and realize their potential that they have as an artist or a writer. And in a lot of places it's hard to find community as a young Native person, especially as an artist. It's hard enough to be an artist. It's a very isolating career, and it's hard to feel like you can do that professionally. And so for me growing up as a youth myself, I'm not very removed from that experience. It was really discouraging. Like I thought I was going to be a lawyer at one point. I wanted to give up, but by making community and meeting people, I was kind of assured that I was on the right path. So if we can do that earlier for Native youth who love to read and write, or who, are figuring out their paths, that can do so much for our communities. And storytelling itself is so important with, the histories of so many different communities. I think specifically of Navajo communities too. Storytelling is a backbone of our history and who we are. It's how we carry who we are into the future, into future generations. And so by empowering the next generation of storytellers, we are ensuring that we will continue to survive as peoples with their own identities and their own stories. And one of those side effects of that, not our purpose as the book club, but one of the side effects is we are also in that way destroying stereotypes about Natives. We are centering our own voices. We are empowering storytellers who might become filmmakers, or they might become professors. And, it's just this whole new generation of leaders empowered by the support for literary programming.
Oh, yes, definitely. And speaking on that, what advice would you give the youth thinking about becoming a writer or a poet?
I would say, one, just keep reading. I think if you ever get stuck with your own writing, look to your poetry ancestors. That's what Joy Harjo calls them. Look to the people who came before you to know you're not alone. It can be really isolating to make things on your own, but people have been doing this for so long. And then two, find community, whether that's online, whether that's with a classmate or a best friend. Read a book together, come to a Indian Girls Book Club event together. Write something, go to a workshop, try to find free programming. And, just try to put yourself out there. And it's a lot easier when you have a support system in terms of finding other writers.
And Kinsale, what is your favorite poem that you have written?
I think my favorite is Ancestors' Wildest Dreams. It was in Poetry Magazine recently, but it's like this thing on the internet where like people make jokes about, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. Like, what does that mean? Especially when you're, having a really bad day and you think about that and you're like, oh my God, did my ancestors want me to be here, like, depressed in bed all day or something like that? So I wrote a poem kind of grappling with that, and I thought it was really fun. I wrote it kind of in like text talk as well.
Oh, wow. And are you able to give us a reading of one of your poems, your favorite poem, or any poem that you could share with us?
Yeah, I can read Ancestors' Wildest Dreams.
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. Ancestors' Wildest Dreams. Ancestors' wildest dreams are drunk on the sticky floor of a Denny's, texting grandma ayo amin nishne, and crying in the same hot breath about not knowing the right word for apology if one exists. Keyboard smashing, resilience, 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 resilience as we delete Instagram so we don't have to see people out sacreding each other. Maybe we're only sovereign in bed, sometimes, drowning in the dark and in the soft pools of their eyes, living off the hard tack of thighs moving to an MCR mixtape we froth. Ancestors' sleep paralysis demon caught in cold sweat and skipped therapy, untangling our bodies from sheets, always untangling hair out from under somewhere. Fractals left in corners, under juniper berry branches. Do we even remember how Grandma baked her pies? The cornstalk stretched higher than holy people that year, and we came home buzzed on lemonade and an auntie's laughter. Everyone is always talking about an ancestor that is or isn't pleased, but I saw a strawberry moon tonight, rising. I learned the word in my language for laugh. We found it together. Dlo, 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 dlo. We eat it. We setting spray it to the page.
Oh, wow, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I love how you incorporated the Navajo language in your poetry as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Kinsale, how can our listeners learn more about the NDN Girls Book Club, your writings, your poetry, and all of your publications? Where can they go to find all of that, and how can they contact you if they have further questions?
The best place is definitely our website. So we're just at ndngirlsbookclub.org. And you can find me through that. You can find all of our programming for all the young artists and writers out there. We have fellowships online. We have a newsletter you can sign up for. We really encourage you to sign up for that. You can find us on Instagram at NDN Girls Book Club. You can find myself on there. I'm usually in the bio. And you can find our email on the website and our social media. And feel free to ask us any questions. We always take time to answer them. Feel free to direct message us any questions. We're always happy to talk and try to come to an event near you when we're in your city or your area. We would love to meet you and talk to you about books and just nerd out.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Kinsale, for taking time out to talk to us today to tell us some more about your NDN Girls Book Club and also sharing all of your amazing accomplishments with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Ahihe.
Thank you for listening to Native Talk Arizona, presented by Native Health and 90.7 FM KRDP. Our executive producer is Susan Levy, sound engineer is Javier Quiroga, and our host is Lanasha Puadi. We hope you will tune in again next week. If you have any questions, please reach us at nativetalkaz@listen2krdp.com.